We pulling? What's up, it's Jimfro, and before you skip the intro, you need to know that this is a prediction video and not an official guide because the fight was not tested on PTR at all. That means we have no footage and this is based entirely on the Dungeon Journal. Our official guide will be posted once we can confirm the best strategy from Heroic. Alright, quick overview first. You're fighting this guy, Scale Commander Sarkareth, basically a superpowered devastation evoker. And as the phases go on, he gets more and more voidy, eventually going full-on Void Lord mode at the end. There's 3 phases, and the fight is mostly single target with some ad cleave in the last 2 phases. And you're probably going to end up saving Bloodlust for phase 3. Now let's get into it. In phase 1, the main mechanic is a debuff that gets put on the whole raid, which you have to remove before the boss eventually casts a big raid-wide channel that stuns and kills you if you still have the debuff. The only way to remove the debuff before that is by getting hit by one of 2 mechanics. Beams that the boss shoots at marked players, or Fire Breath that the boss aims in a random direction. However, you don't want everyone removing their debuff at the same time because removing the debuff does damage to the entire raid, and those 2 mechanics you have to get hit by also do a lot of damage themselves. So the idea is to stagger the raid debuff clears. Have some of the raid get hit by the beams and some get hit by the breaths. However you do it, you need to get everyone cleared before the big channel happens. Also, the Fire Breaths put a dispellable dot on anyone they hit, so quick dispels can prevent a bunch of damage, and even better, if you have a priest, quick mass dispels could make a huge difference. Other than that, there are some other unrelated mechanics. The boss puts fire bombs on the ground near random players that pulse damage in a circle around them for a few seconds, and then blow up on the raid, leaving a patch of fire on the ground. It's unclear if you can pick these bombs up and move them like you can with the other bombs later on in the fight, but either way, it sounds like they're going to do a ton of raid damage all at once, so try avoid clearing any debuffs when these are going off. It could also end up that you have to bait the spawn placement of these bombs so that the fire patches aren't all over the place. There's a tank mechanic, of course. The boss casts Burning Claws on the current tank, which does big physical damage and applies a long magic dot, but when this dot ends, it explodes on the raid for a percentage of the damage the tank took from the dot. So the tank should taunt swap at as few stacks as possible and use talents and cooldowns that reduce the magic damage taken so that this explosion is more manageable, and we'll have to see if absorbs and immunities work as well. When the boss gets to a certain health percentage that we don't know yet, probably around 70% or so, he starts phase 2. The first thing you need to know is that getting hit by void abilities gives you stacks of Oblivion, a long dot debuff, and if you get to 10 stacks, you go into a different realm where you can't do any damage and you have to recover fragments of your mind within 20 seconds or so to come back or else you die. There's no telling what this is gonna actually look like, but my bet is that this is just a clickable thing you run over to. While you're in the other realm, you can also run around and collect Astral Flares, whatever those are, to get a stacking haste and movement speed buff for a while. So that kind of makes up for not being able to do damage for so long. Anyway, it seems like it's pretty hard to accidentally get to 10 Oblivion stacks and get sent to this realm, so the reason this other realm even exists is actually for the new bombs in this phase. The boss puts void bombs on the ground near random players that pulse damage in a circle around them for a few seconds and then blow up on the raid for a ridiculous amount of damage, unless someone steps onto the bomb, picking it up and getting sent to the Oblivion realm. The explosion doesn't happen if the bomb is in that realm, so when these bombs spawn, designated players will need to pick up the bombs and stand in void stuff to get to 10 stacks before they explode. We're still going to have to see which mechanics are best to stand in to get those stacks quickly. My bet is on this next mechanic. The boss occasionally does a flying breath to a random spot that does a ton of damage to anyone along the way and leaves a void pool behind that ticks for a small amount of damage really fast if you stand in it. If this gives you stacks, then it's definitely the best option. Anyway, this breath also leaves behind some caster ads that have to be interrupted and killed quickly, because their cast does a bunch of raid damage and interrupts casting, and they become immune to CC after a while. On Heroic, they also have a buff that does a bunch of healing every second, and the only way to get rid of it is by dragging them into another mechanic, some purple circles on the ground that occasionally spawn under random players. These circles remove the healing buff, but also put a big heal absorb on any players that touch them. So good luck trying to get the ads in there without touching any of the circle. The tank mechanic is very similar to the first phase, but the dot hits a lot harder now and reduces the tank's healing taken by 25%, and the explosion at the end only hits players within 20 yards, but hurts a lot more. So when the dot is expiring, the tank needs to move away from everyone real quick and use a defensive to survive the explosion. On Heroic, there's one last mechanic for this phase. The boss occasionally puts a dispellable dot on one or maybe a few players, and when this dot is removed, it does raid damage and knocks everyone else away from the dispelled player. So you'll have to plan out when you want to dispel these players and position so that you don't get knocked into bad stuff or off the platform. If there happens to be more than one debuff at a time, mass dispels could be real good too. When the boss gets to a certain health percentage that we don't know yet, probably 35% or so, he destroys the room and starts phase 3. Unfortunately, there's a few big question marks with this phase because of how the Dungeon Journal is worded, but this is what we got. The main mechanic revolves around these asteroids that the boss pulls down from space, which stay on the ground where they land. You have to use these to line of sight the raid-wide one-shot cast that the boss does a little while after they've spawned. But there's also a big group soak on a random player that creates a black hole that pulls in and absorbs nearby asteroids. There's way too many unknowns to have a real strategy now, but my bet is that you have to get rid of a lot of the asteroids on purpose using the black hole group soak thing, so that you have enough room on the platform to line of sight and deal with the other mechanics of the phase. Speaking of which, you still have the same void bombs as in phase 2, but now you have to find a new way to force getting to 10 stacks after you've picked up the bomb. My bet is by standing on the new random swirlies on the ground. They don't hit very hard, but each one gives you 5 stacks, so you can get sent to the other realm in no time. In fact, you'll probably have a lot of people getting sent down on accident in this phase because of that. The same caster ads spawn as in phase 2 whenever the asteroids spawn, but now on Heroic it looks like there's no way to get rid of their huge healing buff. Not sure if this means you have to DPS through it or what, but that's definitely going to be an important thing to figure out. There's a new mechanic that spawns a bunch of void images of the boss that mark random players and then charge through them, doing a bunch of damage to anyone in the way. It says they do damage to targets struck, so these charges might do damage to the caster ads too, which would be a cool way to kill them real quick if you bait the charges well, but otherwise you would just spread out and dodge them. The tank mechanic is very similar to phase 2, but now the explosion at the end of the dot hits everyone in the raid, so the tank really needs to mitigate as much damage from the dot as possible to make the explosion survivable. And finally, on Heroic, there's the same dispellable debuff that knocks everyone back, which is probably even harder to deal with in this phase. The complexity of this phase definitely makes it seem like a good spot for Bloodlust, not to mention that the boss gains a stack of a damage buff every time he spawns asteroids, so the faster you finish this phase, the better. And that's pretty much, wow, that was a lot. Here's a recap for you to review or screenshot for later. Our official guide for this boss is coming out as soon as we can confirm the best strategy, so keep an eye out for that. Like this video and subscribe so it gets recommended to you, or join our Discord to get notified when we post it. Also, thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon for making this video possible. Peace.